Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 84 of the Peak of Serenity podcast. I am one of your hosts, emallson, and as always, I am joined by my co host, Anomoly.
Hello.
And this week, we are going to be talking about bit more from 915. We got some very spicy news this week, like the fact that Spinning Crane Kip is now going to be uncapped, which I think word
Huge.
on the street is basically that that is going to get Windwalker AoE nerfed, because oh
A little
boy,
out of control. A little out of
yeah,
control.
their AoE is already incredible in Mythic Plus. It's going to be even better after
Oh yeah.
that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, yeah. So that'll be we can see we'll definitely dive into that a little bit. But I think first up, how is the last boss of this instance going
How about
for
you go
you?
first?
All right. So it's I think last time we talked we had I think we only had maybe like one or two pulls into phase three. We were still sort of feeling out phase two at that point, and yeah, so we had another two nights on it this week and had some very consistent phase twos, which I think is good. And I think right now our best is about 51% on the boss. So
Nice.
we're
You're getting
there,
there.
we're close. Yeah. So I think to be fair, it's funny, like that seems you only have to get her what to 45 to kill her.
Yeah.
But for us, that's only getting to the second platform and then failing at the third platform. So
Okay.
we still I think have of a little bit of a ways to go. Particularly with like wailing arrows and getting some placement down. The soaks are a little bit. To be fair, I didn't know what our raid leader was like, and like I'll get this soak, and I was like, I didn't realize there were soaks in the final phase of Sylvanas. So that was good. I'm one of the puddle soakers on the first platform when you drop. Like I get the
Yeah.
right platform. Did not realize that was my job. Uh,
Oof.
un- until we made it there, and they were like, okay, now I'm go soak. I was like, what? So, so it's been a learning experience, but no, it's been. I mean, to be fair, it's been fun. Like, it's 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 a boss where like I don't know, for whatever reason, every boss I think ends up like this, but I think for me at least this time it's a little bit more noticeable with Sylvanas, which is like you get to a point in the fight, like phase one seems overwhelming, and now phase one is like everybody seems clean. You get to phase two and it seems overwhelming, and like now we're getting DPS down, things are a lot easier. So so yeah, I think the biggest change, I don't know if we talked about this, the biggest change we made that cleaned up our intermission between phase one and phase two was like actually getting all the healers to get the close chain sets and then actually having our DPS them. Because what we found out was literally DPS were scattering to the four winds, DPSing their
Yeah.
own chains, their own groups, and then like the healers were also fighting it. And so we couldn't heal them or whatever. So
Yeah.
I think that was a big intermission change we made. But it's been good. I mean, we're about 130, 140 pulls in with about like 8 to 10 solid P3 pulls. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Nice. So we are also 130 pulls in now.
Oh, no,
Um,
whoa, nice.
but that is because we've spent a lot of fucking time wiping in phase one.
Oh no.
We
Oh
had
no.
5 phase 2 pulls yesterday or Friday.
Yeah, it's not enough.
No, it's not. No,
It's
it's
not enough.
not. And so I spent all day yesterday just combing through logs, figuring out what the fuck is going on.
Yeah.
And we made a couple comp changes. One of the big things we were having people die to is they were bleeding out during domination chains in phase one while the black arrow was going out
Gotcha.
because they just weren't getting triage healing to
Yeah.
get healed through it. Like there's sets of those chains that you just cannot kill reliably before the first black arrow goes out. You have to healed.
They have to live through it. Yeah. Yeah.
But then also like our intermission is just a mess. We were basically relying on having 3 boomkins doing their Rav AoE set up to hard carry arrow,
Yeah.
and that was not working consistent because basically they were just not like we would usually get 2 of the 3 to do it, but
Yeah.
then the third one wouldn't get it, and that would mean that stuff would die really slowly and people would just bleed out. We would get to 6 stacks of the chain dot and people would just die.
Gotcha.
um and then we were trying to get healers chained to the near chains and melee break them out. We ran into issues with the way that the spawns can change. So the way that the spawns work always get the center set of chains. You always
Yep.
get one chain by itself somewhere. And then you get there's 4 other spots chains can spawn. Basically northeast, southeast, southwest, and northwest. And you get 3 of those. And we were stacking right in front of the southwest one. So if the southwest one spawned, it was really easy. The healers just got to the back group and they got chained to it. The
Yeah.
southwest one didn't spawn. Getting the healers chained to the correct
Oh
chain
no,
set
yeah.
was virtually impossible. And so we are adjusting our intermission strategy pretty substantially for tonight because like we actually have reached the point that our phase one is really really clean except for those 2 things. It's the bleeding out and it's the intermission stuff.
Yeah.
And so if we can get through those, then every single pull should be a phase 2 pull. At this point, so um, but yeah. So prog not going so great. I was really happy with where our prog was when we talked last week. But we've had
Yeah.
2 raid nights since then, and I am no longer very happy with where our prog is. Um, and yeah, fingers crossed that tonight we get a lot more work in on phase 2.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize there's different chain sets because it's fun. Well, spawns. I knew they were slightly different. I didn't realize they were that different because where we stack, there's always at least one. Like there's the one in the center, right?
Yeah,
But the one that the healers get is
it's either to
always
the
not
right or
always
the
in the
left.
same. Yeah, it's always like just
Yeah,
around our stack point. So we just sort of back away from the center, and normally we're in range, right, of anything we need to be.
yeah.
So
So basically, where we're going now is like we're going instead of being southwest, we're going straight south, which is going to be in between the southwest and southeast spawns. And then
gotcha,
like the healers are just gonna look, and if the southwest one is spawning, then they're gonna get chained to that one, and if it's not, they're getting chained to the southeast one. So there's always one that's like very close to us that they can get chained to.
gotcha. Yeah, now I'm intrigued because I wonder where our stack point is. Oh yeah,
I don't
our
know.
stack point is southwest actually.
Yeah, because I think we actually used a similar one to what you were doing.
Yeah,
But doing this way actually also let us give like totally deterministic assignments to the rest of the raid for like what they were killing when. And that's one other
gotcha.
thing we were having as well is we were also having DPS like scattered to the 4 winds, and then the chains were just not consistently dying
Uh huh.
like quickly enough because people were spending a lot of time just running around. And
Yeah.
time spent running around, not time spent DPSing.
Yeah.
So we've changed it so that
God.
people have assignments now. So like the range to killing the center, then going to northwest and then northeast, and the melee are going southwest, southeast, northeast. And so
Gotcha.
fingers crossed,
Hope
it should be
hopefully
more
that helps.
consistent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Hopefully that helps for sure.
yeah, I'm getting some major Jaina flashbacks right now because Jaina is a boss that I had 400 something pulls on, and almost all of them were phase 1.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, most of ours. I feel like if I remember Jaina correctly, we split phase one and phase two as the majority of it. But our phase two pulls where we would wipe were very consistently wrong. Like ice path callouts where like somebody called
Yeah.
out where to go wrong and we just died. So it was not like, hey, we ticked down or we didn't do something. It was just like somebody made a wrong call out and we would die. It was very
Yeah,
frustrating.
I mean,
So
we also died 7 times to Calamity last or on Friday, which is
we found so fun fact, we found out like our hunters, I guess we only had one, would immune and run into his arrow to like remove it, but like wasn't telling people. So people were like randomly dying to calamity, and we finally figured out like 2 or 3 pulls in. So yeah, it was that was
nice,
funny. Yeah, because like our hunter would
nice.
run away, turtle, get one of the far chains on him, and then run into it to clear the buff or whatever, the debuff, and it was
Yeah,
randomly killing like a druid who was out there doing something. So um, but yeah, no, I mean, hopefully the changes help. Yeah, the whole inconsistent getting healers chained. Once we like personally for our guild, once we did that, and once we sort of had people focus, it let healers like it let us run out to the middle and heal like far change people, right?
yeah,
Because we would always have probably like 3 or so people get to like 6 stacks.
yeah,
And so they would need some targeted healing as like the end of the intermission went. So but cool. I mean, yeah, hopefully tonight's good for you. So what I'm thinking, I made a prediction, kind of internally, but I'll say it here is that I think Thursday is our kill day. I think if we get
Nice.
a very solid Tuesday in and see phase 3, I think we probably only need about 5 or so more phase 3 attempts. And it's really for me because I want to make sure my cooldowns are good. I'm like nervous about how we
Yeah.
set cooldowns up for that.
Yeah, I still have to
But
go
yeah,
through and do some more cooldown planning for me for phase 3 because I get to be the vacuum for most of it.
gotcha.
So,
Yeah, that'll be fun. But I guess maybe staying on the Sylvanas train as we get into what happened last week. There was a couple of Sylvanas changes, I guess we'll say. One of the big ones was
yeah.
a game performance change. So
Yes.
I don't know if I think they had mentioned that they were doing this last time we spoke, but it actually went in, I think, this week. And it definitely saw a change. Our first maybe 2 or 3 pulls of Tuesday were DPS dying because they were expecting the lag,
And then
and
didn't.
it didn't come. So yeah, so a bunch of Sylvanas sort of or not a bunch, but some optimizations there, and then a couple of Wailing Arrow and Black Arrow, excuse me, cast changes. So because the first one in phase 3, Mistweaver monks are no longer preferred Wailing Arrow targets, which was always fun being the only healer getting targeted by that. Uh, so that was a good time. I think I did heroic a couple weeks ago, and I think I got like every Wailing Arrow I was targeted by one of them.
That's amazing. I wonder
Cast,
why
which
that
was
was
fun.
happening.
So the only thing I can think of is it was like a race condition where um since Mistweaver is both a melee and a healer, I wonder if like through like their when they do like some sort of prioritization of who gets targeted by it, like we
Yeah.
didn't fit in any buckets, so we ended up airing out and just being a top target. Like we weren't like classified as a
But
tank who always gets a
paladins are also a melee and a healer, so wouldn't they? I don't
there
know.
there has always been a weird way that they've determined at least Mistweaver
Okay.
like, as a healer versus a melee, like, in that sort of because like, this always goes like, you always hear the people used to use the term soft melee and hard melee in terms of,
Yeah.
like, how we were classified, like, Mistweaver was always hard melee, meaning, like, we were just treated like melee for any mechanic that would happen.
Yeah.
And then Paladin was, like, soft melee where, like, they would generally be considered a healer, except maybe with specific abilities. And the most egregious one was Gul'dan eyes. So the eyes on Gul'dan would target a person, and on Mythic they had an AoE pulse around them, so you had to spread out. They only ever
Yeah.
targeted ranged. However, paladins were a valid target to that ability
Yeah.
at a
Okay.
time when paladin was mostly in melee. So
Yeah.
that's like the biggest one. But yeah, um, I think it probably had something to do with the way they're like we're classified as a class and spec, and we just end up being like an error piece,
Yeah.
right? Like it. I don't know. I think of most Blizzard encounters as big if then statements, and then so
Yeah.
we weren't in there. And I guess the Black Arrow changes were interesting too. So so we actually had this happen where they would fix an issue where basically both tanks could be targeted by the same Black Arrow cast. We had this happen on multiple pulls this week or last week, I guess, before the change went in, which is annoying. Um,
So is that the that Black Arrow's phase 1, right?
the phase 1 ability, yeah. So we'd
Yeah.
have a tank get or both our tanks get hit by it, and, like, to be fair, like, I think as a tank, you just sort of zone out, so if it's not yours to get targeted by it, like, you see the cast go off, I guess you taunt the boss maybe, and, like, your co-tank runs out, and you expect that to happen, but, like, what was happening for us is, like, we just died, like, a Black Arrow landing in the group, and we'd, like, look at logs, it's like, well, our monk got it and our warrior got it, like, in the same
Oof.
cast, so,
I
yeah.
have never gotten Black Arrow past the first one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
I
normally,
don't
I think, the way our timing works out too is mostly our
yeah.
monk gets it, he tanks second, but,
Um
um
this third change fixed an issue where Dark Sentinels could cast Rage, which is their fixate on target struck by a very recent Black Arrow. Kind of a partial fix because
Does
what
it
it
work? I'll
doesn't so
listen.
what it does is if you have been shot by a Black Arrow, you can't get targeted by Sentinels from that one or future ones. But you can be targeted by ones that have already spawned. So if you have the second arrow, you can be targeted by sentinels from the first arrow.
It's stupid. We lost, I think, 1 or 2 people to this.
Yeah, we
Um,
lost some people to it on Friday as well. It's really obnoxious. Like it's
yeah.
such an oversight. Like you wanted to
Yeah,
just be
yeah,
people that are picked because they all had the debuff at that time. They all have the black arrow debuff. You know what the 3 targets are.
right. Plus, it's always awkward because you're normally running out and you sort of like, I don't know, we do like a loop thing. So like the person with black arrow stands in a specific spot and everybody else runs to the side that gets it and then like comes into the center so they hit. So most of the
Yeah,
sentinels spawn together. So literally if you're, yeah, to your point, if you're second or third, you are running to where all the
the
sentinels are
sentinels
supposed to be
already
spawning.
spawned. Yeah,
Yeah, so you have no chance of like, yeah, getting out of there. So yeah. Yeah, somewhat, yeah, partial change, but yeah, it's at least dying after you get hit to like a sentinel running at you or your own sentinels was very, very annoying. Like getting, targeted immediately as you sort
yeah,
of try and waddle your way back in is annoying. So, but yeah, the optimizations. Like, I mean, I know we touched on that quickly, but like that's a big change. Like
yeah.
we've seen very
It's
little
very
lag. It's a
nice.
yeah, super, super noticeable. So,
There's also a
um,
couple of undocumented changes to Sylvanas that I wanted to touch on.
oh, I don't know about these.
Because I have all the hotfix information in prog stats to show when major hotfixes go in.
Mhm.
Um, and I was asking the Illuminati, hey, how many minor bug fixes does it take to make a major hotfix? Specifically about Sylvanas.
Yeah.
And they were like, I don't think any of these kinds of major hotfix, except for the undocumented fixes that they did this week. And I was like, sorry, what undocumented fixes? And so there's two. Number one, Ruin no longer consistently wipes the raid. It still will sometimes because we had it wipe us on our phase 2 polls
Uh huh.
this week. So it still can kill you, but apparently it won't always because there's reports of people like having Ruin go off and just nobody dies.
I've seen that. Yeah, that actually happened to us.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's one of them. And then the other one is actually related to Veil Baits in Phase 2, where previously there was basically a grid that they went on, and it wouldn't overlap them. So there was always at least some amount of space between them. Now they
Uh huh.
target players, and so if the entire raid is stacked, then they are going to basically be like very very likely to be just hard stacked, and then you can
Gotcha.
just walk out of them.
Gotcha.
So that second one is a big one.
Yeah, because we've been doing the it's weird that that just went in because we've been doing the whole, like, group up, at least on the first DPS phase, and then, like, gate out,
Yeah.
right? As they start spawning, so huh,
Yeah,
interesting.
I don't know
Yeah,
specifically how it interacts with the ones on the second set of platforms. I haven't gotten there
yeah,
yet. But the first set of platforms, it was pretty noticeable that they would like we went from having 3 in a big line on one
yeah.
of the platforms to having them like completely compressed into one, and like
Very
there's
cool.
it's not like exactly one because they weren't exactly stacked, but still a lot closer. So
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, the ruin change is funny too because I think someone in my guild was like, "Can we, like, game this to just, like, push through phase 2 quickly just to sort of, like, try phase 3, basically turn into, like, Fallen Avatar?" In terms of
yeah,
like when you wouldn't soak beams on Fallen Avatar just so you could practice like the second phase of that fight, could you do the same thing here? Because like immediately if she casts Ruin and you don't die, she immediately jumps to like start her next sequence. So like from a DPS perspective, you lose out like on a DPS phase doing that.
yeah.
Um,
But you could
but you can
practice phase
also
3 with her just having higher
yeah,
health.
exactly, yeah, so you could push her yeah, you could push into phase 3 quicker, hopefully with everyone alive, and then do it that way. So, yeah, we were trying to game it. I think we spent, like, maybe 1 poll or, like, not even a poll, just sort of talked about potential ways to game it, but,
Yeah.
yeah, that might be one way that they tried or, that you could use it to make it a little bit easier or sorry, to give yourself more practice on phase 3, so,
I don't think you can abuse that really. I think that one's just kind of a crapshoot, and sometimes you will have a pull where Ruin goes off and you just happen to not die.
yeah.
Uh,
At which point you should jump off anyway because you missed the DPS phase there, and then, yeah,
yeah,
you're sorta screwed, so, um but yeah, those are the, I didn't realize the Veil one on Sylvanas, so interesting. All right, cool. So I think next up is a sort of a it's staying with the raid theme. It is a 915 change that's coming with 915, but has to deal with Kel'Thuzad and the fact that at the end of
oh
every
boy.
phylactery phase, he will cast a new ability called Dark Surge, which basically refreshes any major cooldowns that might be on cooldown. So essentially, after every time you do phase 1, do the intermission, and your team comes up from the phylactery, um, he will reset all major cooldowns, which is a massive change to a fight that like literally was an AFK fest, right? We used to call it
Yeah,
AFKT. because the idea was you would essentially like do the phase one where you'd have like the spikes that spawn and the soaks and the tank ads and things like that. But you'd get the boss very low, so he'd stop casting that stuff and then basically hold DPS until a certain timing, and then you DPS him and do phase two.
Yeah.
Similarly, you'd extend phase two as long as you could, and then get back into phase one. And the only reason you did this was for cooldown, right? Like
Yeah.
you needed major healing cooldowns up, you needed major DPS cooldowns up. So it wasn't that the boss was the most difficult part of the boss was literally just waiting, like not doing damage or like being AFK.
Yeah, the most
So
difficult part of the boss for us was getting the timing right, like slowing DPS downstairs and upstairs enough that both of us pushed out of our respective intermission phases at the same time, and also within a few seconds of the end, like the wipe mechanic, so that we would have enough time for our CDs to come back up for the next set of
right, yeah.
fights. That was by far the hardest part of the fight for us.
Yeah, yeah, and then it's also there's like if you are like a second or two early in any one of these things, by the time you get to the third phase, you don't have healing cooldowns up for when the spikes go off, and then you literally just wipe. But it's like
Yeah,
it's a wipe you know about probably 30 to 45 seconds in advance. And because
yeah.
the fight doesn't do any damage, like you can't wipe. I guess you could always kill the spikes early and just sort of
You
wipe it.
can kill
But
one early, and we did have that happen on a couple of progression pulls where like, um, we knew we pushed fast, and someone just dropped a spike outside, it just killed it, and then we did what we could, and usually still died, but you can do some things, but yeah,
yeah, so it was annoying. It's sort of I think it's a theme of this area. It's funny when I was thinking back to when we started this theme or started this tier, and we talked about like sort of what things we don't want them to continue, which was like phase timers, right? Like having certain like DPS checks or just like global timers on things. So like if you got out of sync, the fight just became invariably harder, which I think we still
yeah,
had a little bit of, but like it turned into this like hold damage meta because they did the thing we wanted, which was like reset timers on phase transitions. What ended up happening is now instead of just pushing through and those timers making sense, it was like, well, now you just held DPS, so you'd phase at the right time. So those
yeah.
timers reset at the right
Well,
time.
KT actually didn't start with his cooldown resetting, or his cooldowns resetting when you pushed him. The initial version, his which spells he casts depends on his mana.
Yep.
And his mana wouldn't reset coming back up from the phylactery. You could use that actually to skip mechanics as well. So people are using it to skip some meteors and things. But that did mean that you had to like pay attention to where his mana bar was when you pushed him, because otherwise you would get like spikes immediately after the intermission.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
got fixed
Exactly.
like week 2. So
Yeah, it's not as mad, it's more consistent, but yeah, it's just like, okay, you have a specific cycle of like when you want to do things. So
yeah,
yeah, this will be a good change. It'll probably, I mean, ultimately, it just makes farm easier, right? Like by the
yeah,
time this goes in, the guilds that this is really annoying for, um, or like from a progression perspective, it also makes the fight simpler. But excuse me, we'll be so deep into progression that it's just like we'd expect changes like this to bosses, right? At that
yeah.
point. So yeah, so that is KT changes. It'll be fun. It'll at least make it so you don't have
It'll
to
be a lot
hold
better.
for yeah,
Yeah,
hold for like 45 seconds or a minute in certain cases. So um cool. All right. Next up is another quick hot fix note. One that's incoming is for an achievement that's near and dear to my heart. It's Breaking the Chains achievement, which is sort of the meta achievement for Korthia. Has you kill like every rare, has you do a bunch of certain things with the assaults that come in. Um, get rank 6 with Archivist Codex, which we'll talk about some fun stuff happening with that one. But this one, apparently, the achievement was broken, was not rewarding the mount. So after literally today or this Night Fae assault would have been the first time that you could actually complete it because the final quest you needed to
was
do
in this
a
assault.
the Zoval Shuffle was the achievement name, but it was actually now active. This assault, that quest was active to then do the meta achievement or meta part of the achievement. So yeah, so I guess they weren't handing out the mount, which is just like, dude, like come on, like testing and production, I guess, with this one. So Hotfix is in. I think if you had submitted a ticket, you might have gotten the mount manually from a GM. They've since stopped that, so they're gonna wait for this Hotfix to come in, and then you'll get the mount. So all I need is rank 6 of the Archivist Codex. point, and I will get
How
my
far are
mount.
you
So
into rank 5?
I am about 12,000 of 16,000, so about 4,000 more, and so I've been averaging about 350 rep a day.
Yeah,
So about another, what is that, like another 2 weeks or so, hopefully, give or take. So,
yeah,
yeah, so we're closing in. We're closing.
yep. I completely
How
gave
close
up
are
on
you? Oh,
Archivists. I completely gave up. I'm somewhere in between rank 4 and rank 5.
gotcha, gotcha.
Yeah. I was like, number one, sockets aren't good for me. Like, obviously they're good, but they don't do much. Um,
Yeah,
two, I'm just gonna get my conduits from Torghast at this point. I'm actually almost
yeah.
done with that. So,
I still need to do tour guys this week. Actually, that reminds me.
um,
Um, I forgot you get conduits from that. I just remember that you could get sockets with it, so I just socketed all my
dude,
gear
if
this
I do
week.
my Torghast this week and it gives me a socket instead of a conduit, I'm gonna be so mad.
Yeah,
Sockets
I
are
didn't really. Yeah, I guess
sockets
they're
are not
useless for you,
great.
huh?
I mean, it's
Yeah,
still fine. It's just like I want. So I've got one more 239 conduit to get, and then I start getting 252s. And I mean, fingers crossed I get lucky and I get my good conduit pretty quickly at 252, and
yeah,
then I can just forget about the rest. If I get unlucky, then it might be another 6 weeks before I get the good conduit from Torghast.
yeah. I've stopped doing tour gas. I last week, or actually the last 2 weeks, I haven't done it.
Yeah,
It's like the first
I
weeks I've skipped since the start.
I cannot stand doing this, so I'm doing Torghast instead. That's my comp, and it
Fair.
doesn't really matter because like I have 239, pretty much all 239 conduits. The one I have left to get is Lens. So,
Yeah,
um, but yeah, would it would have been nice to have 252 before Mythic Sylvanas, but I don't
yeah,
think it's that relevant for me. Because it's just invoke Neozao damage is the only one. So
yeah. Yeah, and it's just conduits is always a system I forget about. I feel like I realize a lot of people engage with it, but like for me, I never remember it's there, and then I never know like what my conduit things are. I don't even know how to
yeah,
get conduits outside of using the items. I'll be completely honest
that
with you.
you can't.
Oh, okay, so okay, so that's fair. So
Yeah,
then yeah, that's
they
it's
drop from
stupid.
raid, but the good ones don't drop from raid in general.
Yeah,
So you get them
so,
from Korthia or Torghast, which is
so
the
dumb.
stupidest thing. Like
It's a weird, yeah, weird acquisition method, I'll say.
they went back in Castle Nathria and they added the good conduits to the raid so that you could get them as boss drops. So like Shriekwing started dropping our Invoke News Out conduit. There's no place to get that in
So
9.1.
weird.
It just doesn't drop, and I don't understand it. Like there are a
Yeah,
bunch of 252 conduits that you can get from the raid, but not that one.
that's funny.
Not the only one we care about.
That is hilarious. Yeah, that's very, very weird. Yeah, I wonder why they did that. I don't know. Um, all right. I guess moving forward through this little list. Oh, I don't know why I put this one in there, but I guess somewhat important. Ignore is now account wide in 915. So when you
Yeah.
ignore a player on one account, it now ignores them on all your accounts. To be fair, my ignore list I think has one person on it. So like I don't ever really use it.
Well, no. So it's the other way. It's the other way around. It is if you ignore someone's character, you like slash ignore, Bitcoin Moon,
Yeah.
then it ignores all of their characters.
Oh, right. I messed
You got
up.
it.
I
You
messed
got it
up. Okay.
backwards.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah, I
all
got
of
it
your
backwards.
accounts
Yeah.
that get it. It might, but now it's like all that character and all of their all.
It's a good change, I guess, if someone's sort of like harassing you and stuff
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
actually a really
Uh,
good change.
yeah.
Um,
Sorry. Yeah, I guess I read it. Yeah, I 100% read it wrong. Interesting. Yeah, but yeah, for me, I don't ever ignore people. I also don't talk to people in game other than people I already know. So it's probably why.
yeah, this actually also means that if you ignore someone that's doing trade chat like spam sales,
Yeah, that's true.
they have to get a new account before you see them again.
That is good. Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, that's a great change actually. Great change. Speaking of great changes, the Alliance or 100 Alliance guilds have finally killed Sylvanas Mythic. So yeah, that means Alliance Hall of Fame closed or is closing this reset, which means next reset, Cross Realm Mythic is open, which is cool. I mean, love this sort of idea of cross realm Mythic. Hate the fact that
It's gated by the Alliance completing the instance 100 times.
yeah, which is just it's funny. Like a bunch of people get really upset about this, particularly around like how do we make the factions balance? And it's like, well, like it's such a it's a I don't know. It's like it's not a I don't know if it's a Blizzard problem to fix, right? Like I don't think you ever get balanced factions again. And I would say like I don't think you ever get balanced factions in pretty much any game, I'll say.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
think
this was a
the
thing
idea
even in Pokemon Go, okay?
yeah,
Pokemon Go had people pick one of three factions, and one of them sucked because nobody picked it.
yeah,
And the other two, like, I don't know where they ended up, but around the time it came out, there was like one that was clearly the most popular. And it varied a little bit by area you were in. So there's one that was clearly the most popular in most areas, and there was one that was like reasonably popular in some areas, and there was one that was just like nobody picked
yeah.
it.
Yeah, and I think I often think about this because like a lot of people are like, well, what can Blizzard do to change it? Do they give like Alliance overpowered racials? And it's just like, well, like that doesn't like that's what started this, right? Like back in Cataclysm, I think, or even before that, right? Like the Horde racials from a PvE perspective, or actually just in general, to be fair, were just better than the
Yeah,
Alliance one. So that sort of started the snowball of like you see like the top guilds. That's when like Method went from Alliance to Horde through their progression and stuff like that. Or old Method, now it's I guess there's still Method, not old. What in any event, that's when they transferred over, and that's when you start to see like a trickle, and it becomes a sort of idea of like, well, to play the game at the highest level, or to follow the highest level people, you'll play on one faction, and then like that sort of slowly compounds itself unless it swings the other way. So,
it's
and it
so
did,
I'm relatively active. There's a recruiting Discord for North American servers,
yeah,
for people that are doing guild recruiting, and you don't want to be Alliance looking for players.
no,
Oh man, you are in for a bad time. Like we have it bad already. My team has it pretty bad because we're a weekend team. We do not
hmm
have it as bad. Like there are weekday Alliance teams that have it so much worse.
yeah,
So much worse. One of the
yes,
things they could do to actually help would be to make faction transfers to Alliance free. Um,
that's true.
they could do that because that means that if someone wants to take a trial in an Alliance guild, they can do that, and it's free. And that means that worst case, they fail the trial and they have to pay a transfer fee to go somewhere else,
Yeah,
but they don't have to pay it twice, basically. But there's still a
right,
lot of barriers, like if you've got a character that's not your main that you use to craft potions and stuff. Well, if you're going and trialing in an Alliance guild, do you transfer that character too? That costs twice as much right now. you know
right,
so doing free
yeah,
transfers I think would help, free transfers to Alliance, and it wouldn't even necessarily be about like guilds just like wholesale hopping to Alliance. I don't think that's going to happen, but it
no,
would mean that like you know you could get recruits from Horde that maybe because they don't have to pay literally anything, take the trial, could do it.
yeah, that definitely could be one because you're generally more than likely going to pay not only for the faction transfer but for the server transfer too. So
Yeah,
it's like a $50 investment just to move a character, 55 whatever it ends up being.
yeah,
So
yeah, it's a lot of money. um
yeah,
so it is one of those things where like I think ultimately they're going to have to bite the bullet and make PvE cross faction. Um,
yeah,
but in the short term, that would be a solution that their like business people may not like, because I'm sure they make like $55 a transfer is a good chunk of change, but
yeah,
uh, it would be like a lower cost solution than just flipping the switch and now everybody can play together.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. So, but yeah, I mean that's Alliance Hall of Fame. They closed it, so Crossfire Mythic's there. It's just Yeah, they need to do something, I think, moving forward because it's only going to get worse, and it'll be like down to like 3 guilds that play Alliance, right? Well, there are pretty much is only three,
Yeah,
uh,
I mean,
but yeah, most all those Oceanic, which is yeah, I think the idea there is
Oceania
that
carry, I guess.
yeah, I mean Oceanic never switched to Horde, so like they just stayed Alliance, which is what everybody plays. So you can't actually play Horde on Oceanic realms, but you can
Yeah,
definitely play Alliance.
which
So
kind of goes to show that, especially these days. Actually, these days, Alliance has better racials, except for Goblin Jump. Goblin Jump is
yeah,
the only racial that Horde has that's like clearly better than the thing the Alliance has. Um, but
but every yeah,
it's
all the
not
other
about
racials,
it's
yeah,
not about the factions at this point. It's about the play, about the population,
yeah,
um, and it's about the fact that you need 20 plus people to play Mythic, and you can't go to the lower population faction and expect to be able to do that.
right. Right, and like, yeah, I mean, I don't know how much more we're gonna spend on this, but there's also the trickle down effect of like, you don't even have to raid Mythic to want to play on Horde because like to do anything else in the game, you'll
Yeah,
need to be on Horde, right? Like,
Mythic Plus is another big
heroics,
one.
Mythic Plus, yeah, yeah, all that type of stuff sort of trickle down from that. So yeah, but Lions Hall of Fame closed, cross realm of Mythic incoming. We'll see how that goes. So cool. So next up, I flip flop these a little bit in the order, but next up is progress. So TBC got their phase 2 patch, which unlocked Lady Vash, or well, unlocked Serpent Shrine Cavern and Tempest Keep in terms of content. And Progress killed both bosses in like 2 hours for world first on both, which is we laugh about it, but I mean it's what 15, 16-year-old content been done to
Yeah,
death. Like the idea that the hard this is no longer hard in terms of like just defeating it. It's more of like the way that they did it, which was like how fast they got through it all.
yeah,
Um, which is just crazy. And like I don't know if you saw the skip that they did. I don't know if it was them specifically, but the Serpent Shrine Cavern
I didn't
skip.
see it.
So there's a skip. I wish I should have put it in the notes, and I'm sorry I didn't. But there's a skip where I don't know if you've ever entered Serpent Shrine Cavern, but there's the elevator you take down, and
Yeah, the elevator
apparently
boss.
yeah, as you fall down that elevator, if you basically rocket jump and glide, I know it's not rocket jump and glide, but whatever the
Right.
TBC equivalent of is it, as soon as it opens up into the cavern, you glide onto a pipe that's solid. And then you can run along that pipe and then jump off that pipe and land on Hydros, whoever the first boss is,
Uh huh.
uh, whatever the elemental is. So you basically skip all the bridge trash up there. And you
Which
just kill the first
sucks.
boss and keep moving. Yeah,
Yeah.
the bridge trash is terrible. So yeah. Um I watched that skip, which I thought was pretty crazy. And just the speed at which like the different things that they do just to speed up encounters and like in between trash, I think is just like a very much a like speed runner type mentality, which I
Yeah,
think is cool.
at
But
this scale, like at this time scale, it's no longer about like how long it takes them to progress bosses like it is on retail. It's
yeah,
about how many different ways can they find to not do trash? How many different ways can
yeah,
they find to like make boss encounters a little bit shorter so that they can get the whole thing in, like this in 2 hours.
right, yeah, yeah. It's all about the speed now, which I think is a cool way to look at like a quote unquote world first race. It's like it's very much like an MDI type mentality, but with what is it still 40 people, right? Or 25 people,
25.
sorry.
5.
25, yeah. On that. So yeah, that was cool. Congrats to progress on it. Like KT still probably one of my favorite boss fights. To progress on. I thought that was so cool. And Lady Vosh was interesting too. It was like throwing the cores while seemingly a very easy thing to do today, which is like if you guys don't know the encounter, there are mobs you need to kill that dropped an item that you couldn't move when you had the item in your inventory, so you had to like toss it in a chain and then essentially dunk it. Sort of like the mail muncher in the mail muncher boss in
Also like
Return.
Gahoon. The
Oh yeah,
orbs on
Gahoon,
Gahoon.
yeah. Yeah, the orbs on Gahoon, yeah, for sure. Yeah, very similar. So, um, it was a cool boss at the time. And yeah, it was fun. Fun to do. So yeah, miss those. But in any event, congrats to progress. And I think the final thing before we get sort of into the topic of the day, which is to talk about little SCK and some other changes, is Wowhead did an interview with BDGG in terms of their like feedback on sort of class balance and like comp changes and things like that. And it was I don't think anything sort of it wasn't anything sort of crazy that we haven't I think people haven't already talked about, right? It's like, hey, warriors were really good, but or sorry, enhancement shamans were good because warriors were good. And so
Yeah.
like there was like a synergy there. Like boomkins were were crazy good, but everybody knew that. The difference between Venthyr and Night Fae was like super minor that like it just depended on your playstyle. Well, I think Venthyr was like theoretically higher DPS. It also required a very specific like cast sequence and playstyle.
I
So like if
think
you're
so. This is something to keep in mind. BDGG is talking from the perspective of completing the world first level,
right, yeah, that's true.
where
That's fair.
like their boomkins do not have multiple weeks to practice Ravenous Frenzy, or they have to do it on the hard bosses.
Right, yeah,
That said, I also think kind of the situation that we ended up in, like we have three druids, three boomkins, um, and I kind of wish that they had just played Night Fae, and that we had just not played around Rav. Rav is
yeah,
extremely good. When they got it, like when they got it figured out, they just hard carried entire phases. Just like the three of them together, just hard carrying, you know, KT downstairs, that kind of
yeah,
thing. But the ability is so incredibly punishing that um, it's just frustrating. I think
yeah.
it might have slowed down our progression if they had been Night Fae instead of Venthyr, but oh my god, I don't ever want to deal with Ravenous Frenzy again.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a rough one. So, yeah, and I think all of our druids actually are Venthyr, but yeah, to that point, they have gotten weeks to practice and plenty of time to sort of get it on lockdown until we got why we got to these harder bosses, and even then they still die
Yeah,
randomly.
I mean, we've like I was talking about earlier when we were discussing Sylvanas. We had planned on our druids kind of carrying damage on the chains in intermission, and they still are going to do a lot of chain damage. Basically, now we have a fallback where, like, if one of our druids eats the Rav stun, we're not completely SOL.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to look at it for sure. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think from a DPS perspective, they sort of went into all those sort of all the different ones why certain classes were brought, right? Um, and they also talked a little bit about healers. Just understanding that like Disc Priest and Holy Paladin just too strong in terms of a pair. Um, and like a little bit, they touched on a little bit. The funny thing is they did mention Mistweaver monks, which from a farm perspective are like it's fun to see.
They
In
also
terms
talked
of
about
like
making like Tiger's Less an AoE cooldown,
which
which please don't. I love it as it's. Don't forget that's not just a Mistweaver button.
yeah. Yeah, so yeah, almost like a roar because like movement was a very important this tier in terms of
Yeah,
like baiting things and moving out of it. But yeah, it's funny that they touched on the rise of Mistweaver, particularly in farm, because you'll see a bunch of Mistweavers now sort of topping overall HPS charts, but not being brought to progression just because like DPS wise, we still are behind Holy Paladins that can drop Ashen, and Disc is just in general really good at damage and does just enough healing to keep the raid alive. Still has barrier from a
and has
mitigation
barrier.
perspective. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then they talked a little bit about tanks, which I thought was slightly interesting in the fact that like Paladin was so prop Paladin specifically was fairly high on their specific list, and they sort of split time between Brewmaster and DK at the end as
yeah,
like their second tank.
yeah.
Um,
I think that's if you look at the like first 10 kills of Sylvanas, there's like 8 prop paladins or something like that, maybe 9.
yeah,
Very very high up there because they do have just incredible damage, but they also bring immunities. Um, and the immunities are very good.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, it seems like that's a I don't know if that's going to be a thing now as we move forward. Because well, actually, to be fair, it has been a thing. I think for the last couple expansions in terms of like pre-immuning things, so that you don't actually get it right, where you're still a valid target in your immunity, and if you get targeted by an ability, the ability just doesn't go off, right? You can
right.
kind of negate it, right?
Right. So
Um,
there's things as well like on KT you can spell warding someone that's getting targeted by the meteor, and then they don't have to soak. Um,
yep,
so early on that's nice. There's on on Guardian, Sloot infamously did the solo tank on a
solo
prop
tank, yeah,
paladin, which also goes to show that they are actually like not squishy as they had been in the past. Not as squishy. They are still squishier than some other tanks. But I mean, Guardian slaps, and solo tanking that is no mean feat. But then that was made possible by the fact that they have Divine Shield and they had Spell Warding.
Yep.
So
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it was nice to get a little bit of, I guess, feedback. It wasn't as detailed as I think you might. It wasn't like a full review of like, hey, here's everything we thought about as we all
yeah,
went through it. But it was good to get at least a little bit of a sort of look behind the scenes from. I mean, to be fair, what the number 2 U.S. guild and top 10 world guild overall. So
yeah,
top 5
yeah.
world guild. So yeah. No, good. Always like to see BDGG in the news for sure. So cool. I think that's sort of a wrap on last week's topics. Uh, and now we're going to dive a little bit into. I feel like we've been doing this a lot. We gotta pick a new topic for next week, but
Yeah.
a little bit into some of the additional changes. It feels like the changes are starting to slow a little bit in terms of what we're seeing on PTR. Like they're starting to solidify like the scope of this thing.
Yeah.
But we did get a couple of sort of we'll say interesting changes sort of dropped into PTR this week. But I guess the first one being the target cap changes. So basically, they have removed the target cap for spinning crane kick across. I think it's all monk specs, right? It's not just um,
So right now it doesn't affect Brewmaster, because
okay.
Brewmaster has a separate spinning crane kick spell. Um,
Gotcha,
but
gotcha, gotcha.
it should. It
Yeah,
should.
gotcha. Well, that's yeah. So spinning crane kick now uncapped. A bunch of people came into, particularly like the Mistweaver channels, thinking like we were now some AOE gods in Mythic Plus, which and like Venthyr is now somewhat the most amazing thing ever. Still with like this change, and we'll have unlimited Venthyr uptime with
Unlimited
our
power.
with our legendary and our uncapped spinning crane kick. I mean, like I'll be completely honest with you from like a Mistweaver perspective. This is, I mean, it's a DPS increase, right? No matter how you look
Yeah.
at it, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's a game breaking one for us at least, right? I think the
Yeah.
bigger issue, like we sort of talked about briefly at the start, was like Windwalker. When I would be not that I'm scared to be a Windwalker, but like there's got to be some other changes to Windwalker
D-
here because
Dance of Chi-Ji is going to die for that.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's fair because you get a dance proc and unlimited or and uncapped spinning crane kick on a massive like
With
10,
Bone Dust
15,
Brew
20 mile
active.
pull. You just yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone at that point is Trill. Everyone at that point is just Trill by just
Yeah.
hitting one button.
I mean, there's
So
there's a guy in my guild that on his Windwalker alt in Mists did 100k on a single pull, like a single
Christ.
pack, just like
Yeah.
just chain dance and Chi procs with Bone Dust Brew up.
Yeah.
um, they can already do some truly incredible things. And now if you take that 6 target capped SCK, which he was at that 6 target cap on that one pull because there were 6 enemies in it,
Yeah.
and then you just chain 3 pulls together and he gets that to happen with 18 mobs, just like casual 300k damage.
Yeah. Without trying, right?
I mean,
So
there's a little bit of luck in that because he did get to just cast spinning crane kick back to back to back to back with Dance of
yeah.
Chi. So that's a little bit. There's an element of luck to getting that much damage out of it, but still, oh my god, it's going to be nuts.
Yeah. So yeah, I think while I don't play Windwalker very regularly, I feel like I expect some changes to some of their buffs, procs, things like that. Because there's no way this lives.
Dance of
There's
Chi
no
is also
way.
something that people in the PvP community are not happy about because the interaction with Dance of Chi and Bonus Brew and the other multipliers that they have, like the conduit that increases their damage from having all their SCF clones fixated on somebody, and an SCF itself. You add all those together and you can just like Dance of Chi and like murder someone.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And
hey, I guess there'll be changes across the board here for this, or some
yeah,
some
we're
other mitigating.
I think Dance of Chi is gonna die. I think Dance of Chi is
Yeah.
gonna die. I think that's what they're gonna do. They're gonna just say, listen, he was too beautiful for this world.
Yeah. Yeah, and there hasn't. I mean, there hasn't been too many other changes. Even like so, just I mean, that was the big one for monks specifically, right? I think So, but there hasn't been many changes across other classes yet, at least that were announced this week. So, I mean, I'm hoping
Yeah.
we'll start to see some balancing in the next couple weeks on the PTR.
There's only one other spell that got its cap completely removed this week, and that's Glaive Tempest, which is in talent for Havoc Demon Hunter that I don't think anybody has ever picked. It's
Fair.
their artifact ability from Legion, and it was like weird and bad in Legion too. It like did okay numbers, but it was weird and bad in Legion too. It's still weird and bad, and maybe it does numbers again, and people pick it because it does numbers. But I cannot remember a single time I've ever heard anybody say, "Man, I wish I could pick Glaive Tempest. It's a really cool ability."
That's so funny. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, so I mean, I guess yeah, they also I think also removed um oh I sorry I'm thinking I'm reading the notes wrong. So yeah, so that's sort of the I guess the two AoE cap updates this week. They also added some catch up mechanics in Korthia,
Yeah.
specifically around the Archivist Codex reputation, which I know you're excited about this one, Emallson.
Uh huh.
But
Uh huh.
they basically added sort of some additional relic generation. So there was a tier 4 offering right now that's in the game that basically sort of has you have a chance to like double up the reward you get in terms of relics. Whenever you get relics or reward from like world quest or killing a mob or something like that. Um, so they've now increased that doubling, so the effect that it can double, which is I think good. And then they've also added more relic drop increasing items on tiers 3 and tiers 5. So when you get to tier 3, there's a new thing you can buy, which basically increases the chance you get, I think, more relics that way. Um, and all these, of course, are bind on account, so they will work with alts. So idea is like they're just sort of increasing relic generation at more points in terms of as you sort of raise your reputation there. Um, which is like I don't know what I think it's funny that they're adding it now. Well, not funny that they're adding it now, but it's interesting that they add it now in sort of 915 in terms of like what I'm wondering if Blizzard ever goes in and has an idea of what they want to grind to be, and then like, and it seems like they missed the mark, right?
They missed the
Like,
mark on this one because nobody knows what the fuck to do. They have never
yeah,
made a more confusing or tedious grind than
yeah,
this. It's not like so if you look at stuff like the grinds that were on Timeless Isle back in the day, stuff like the bloody coins,
yeah,
you didn't need to for one thing, you didn't need to grind those. So you straight up you just didn't have to do it. But then it's also like figuring out how to do that grind because you want the thing at the end of it was part of like why you were doing it. As opposed to
right,
this where like people are trying to do it for raid gear, basically.
yeah,
And it's just I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea how to optimize this. I did a little bit of looking at it. There was a bunch of old information floating around that's like I had been told was out of date. And I like
yeah,
asked some people and they're like, do this, do this, do this, do this, and I was like, you know what, I didn't actually write that down so I don't remember anymore. But it's just like the Archivist rep grind, if it were for transmog and toys and mounts and whatever, I think it would be totally fine.
yeah,
Maybe a little bit overtuned in terms of like the amount of time it requires, but I think it would be pretty fine. But as part of a grind for raid gear, it's so opaque. There's nothing clear
right,
about it. It's just frustrating. And then on
right.
top of it, there's the random doubling chance of fragments. So like some days you get 3,000 fragments, and some days you get 100.
Which is annoying. Yeah,
Yeah,
and the weird thing too is like it's like on rank 6, there are two items that let you increase the item level of like your when you do go through upgrades of like the Korthia armament gear, but
right.
they're both on rank 6. So like, and by the time you get to rank 6, in most cases, like you're filling in gear on alts, I guess, but I don't think your alts actually get the achievement to do it. So your alts still have to grind Korthia. So it's almost like they built the grind not for your main character, but for your alts to gear up. I don't know. It's just weird the rep itself. I mean, like I said at the start, the only reason I'm doing it is because it's part of a meta achievement and I want to mount because I guess I'm now a
You're
mount
getting
collector in
the
this game.
third hand mount or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's also the dark colored one, so it's like black with like red highlights. It looks really
Okay.
cool.
Okay.
I think it's the best looking one personally. But yeah, I mean, yeah, Korthia, like yeah, and like the only like the way that I do Korthia is like if I see a rare, I'll kill it. I don't look out for them, right? And then I just do the chests, like the chest and the rift every day.
Yeah.
There's like 4 chests, and that's sort of how I get my stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Korthia just it's they seem to want to keep recapturing Timeless Isle, but then put player power on it, which is like the only player power I remember on Timeless Isle was like
Was
your
the
cloak.
coins?
Well, the
Well,
coins,
there
but
was
then
a. Okay,
the
yeah, there was a
quest for the
coin.
cloak, right?
Yeah.
Like the legendary cloak, you had to do stuff on the Isle. But the
You didn't have
coins
to do that
themselves, I don't remember.
much.
Oh, I think part of the quest sent you there for like a couple things, but
Right,
it
but it
wasn't a
wasn't like a
ton.
long grind you had to do on the
No,
isle.
no, no, because like the idea is you'd have your cloak before you did garage, right? You had your cloak
Yeah.
for garage,
Yeah.
which is like
Uh,
that's actually such a good concept if you think about it. I'm sorry, we're going off on a tangent here, but the idea is that like you make a grind for power, particularly here, right? End when the normal player gets to the final boss of that tier. Because like you'd want to use your super powerful item to kill the super powerful boss.
right.
And like in this
Right.
case, it seemed like they didn't. They're like missing that. Where like
Well, there's
there's a
also the fact that you
disconnect.
don't get a super powerful item for finishing this grind.
Well,
You
it's
get
yeah,
between 2 and 6 sockets, or 2 and 4 sockets, whatever it is, because you can't socket domination set gear.
that's fair. Fair point. Fair point. But yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, it just seems like the grinds nowadays are just grinds for like grinding sake versus like yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know, matching some
Um,
level of like getting something and using it. So
the other thing that was on Timeless Isle that I recall, which I didn't rate at the time, so this is secondhand, was frogs for the coin.
yeah,
But that was
sit there
also
and kill
something where you
frogs.
just like it wasn't a daily grind or something. You just went there on an afternoon and killed frogs for an hour, and then you had all the coins that you could ever want. Really,
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Just
I
try
know
not
about
die
that
by getting
actually
the debuff stacked.
more from people talking about going and grinding the frogs for coins to bonus roll transmog from Siege.
Oh yeah, because you could use the coins to buy the tokens. That's right. 'Cause yeah, it was like the BFA style, like you buy 3 tokens at that point. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember those. But yeah, so it feels like they try and recreate Timeless Isle every expansion. Every expansion gets like further and further from what Timeless Isle actually was. So
Not, I mean, you're like 90% right, but then like Mechagon exists, and the reason that Mechagon was closer is that Mechagon didn't have this like huge bit of player power attached to it, and just had a bunch
right.
of stuff going on. Whereas
That's
like
true. True.
Porthia has rares. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, and like a faction you need to grind up. Yeah, that's true. That is true. But I mean, I guess in 915 it'll get slightly easier. I don't know how much easier, but
Yeah,
slightly easier.
I'm gonna say
Um,
this is not enough to get me to go and actually get rank 6.
yeah,
I
no.
stopped doing the assaults. I am like a bajillion years off of getting the meta achievement. Um, I did finish. I have the achievement for Torghast now for maxing out the all the stuff there.
I don't know. Yeah, this was it was a
It was
couple
last
weeks ago. It
week,
was like oh last week,
last week
yeah.
or the
So
week
actually
before.
so I did do that. That was the last time I did Torghast was whenever that cap hit. That was the last
Yeah.
week I did it. So
Which the final like capstone traits for that are actually like really powerful.
yeah. Yeah, they are. That's for
Uh,
sure. Um but
yeah.
yeah, so Korthia easier soon. Well, faster, I guess. Maybe not easier, but faster. Um, and then the other thing that they announced was they officially announced Mage Tower coming back with
We
Legion Time
speculated about
Walking.
this last week. It's coming.
Yeah, yeah. So and they've also sort of now said what the reward is. So basically the to sort of I want to spend a little bit of time talking about this one too, but they're
Yeah.
reopening all 7 of the scenarios, right? So there was what, 2 tank,
No, no, no.
1
One
healer,
tank.
1 tank, 1 tank, 2 healer, 4 DPS.
Okay, there's 2 healer only by virtue of the fact that Disc Priest got a different one.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So it's 1 tank, 1 healer,
And
5
the Disc
DPS.
Priests are like mushrooms. They're off
Yeah.
on their own axis of existence.
But yeah, but the Disc Priest one, I guess they sort of said it here in the notes. The Disc Priest one was the same as like the BM Hunter, Windwalker Monk,
Yeah.
Gesture Lock. Yeah.
Yep.
So the way that they're doing this is that if you basically defeat it, you get a chance at transmog. It seems like the transmog is not spec specific, but just class specific.
Right.
So
It's a
technically,
recolor of the tier 20 year.
yeah. So technically, you really only have to do this on each class once. Just pick the spec. I think that works the best. There's also a
Yeah.
achievement for doing all 7 scenarios, completing all 7 of
Yes.
them on different classes. So, yeah, I'm excited about this. I'm also
They also announced one more thing before we talk about our
oh sorry.
impressions of this. It's going to be normalized player power. I don't know exactly what that means yet, um, but normalized player power meaning some kind of eye level scaling, so that you can't just outgear it like you could at the end of Legion. Which actually means
Yeah,
that, like, depending on when you did it, it's going to be either easier because you did it at the beginning of Nighthold, or harder because you did it at the end of Legion
right at the end.
than the last time you actually did these encounters.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and sorry, they are adding one other reward. There's a druid form reward if you do it on your druid. It's like a fell bear, forebear
Yes.
thing. Actually
Uh,
looks kind of cool.
which I'm going to pull up. So first off, the monk transmog on stream uh,
Front and center.
is actually, this is the best color of this set. Actually, maybe the second best. There's the white color that's pretty good too,
Oh
but
yeah.
this one like really stands out. This is neat.
Yeah, the orange. Yeah, I actually really like it. I don't like I said. I think I've said in the past. I'm not a huge fan of transmog, but this is kind of cool.
And then the
Huge fan
fell
of
bear.
collecting things.
So the reason, so they're not, you cannot get the old artifact um, weapon skins. Those do not unlock. They made an exception for the werebearer form, which I agree with their reasoning for 100%, because it is such a unique thing. It's not like, okay, so for Brewmaster, for example, our weapon skin is just another like staff with a boondoggle on the end that has physics. Like,
Yeah.
there's 16 other ones that you can get from Legion. You may not get the exact one that you get, but you can get that form factor. You can get something that's very similar. You can get pretty close to it. There is nothing that's remotely close to the werebear form in the game. You either have it
No.
or you're the bear with your ass in the air.
Right, right. I think the other thing too is that as a particularly as like a guardian druid here, right? You don't see your transmog, right? So them getting like the tier 20 armor recolor for the majority of their time spent in a
Well,
raid,
that
they don't get
also
to see it.
applies to like feral druid, right? But the
Yeah, that's
feral druid
true.
form is just a shiny cat. Like, it's still a cat. You can get other cats. The werebear is
Yeah,
not just a bear.
that's true. That's true. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is a very different model. Yeah, different animations, all that type of stuff. So, um, but yeah, so they announced sort of Mage Tower coming back, announced the reward structure, what's coming. And yeah, so the tuning wise, right? So sort of basically talking about normalized player power tuning, which um I I'll see. Like I think the funny thing is, and I think people are gonna get upset about this regardless of how they tune it, right? Whether it's gonna be quote unquote too easy or too hard for the individual player, you'll make your own determination. I it's not gonna be like, for anybody who did original Mage Tower, particularly original Mage Tower, like, as it like, I'll not say as it was intended, but, like, early on, so in, like, the Nighthold, basically right after it launched, it's gonna be easier for you to do this. Like,
Yeah,
for the simple fact that you know what to expect, right? Like, you might not remember specific timings back then, but you'll
yeah,
know, like, I can tell you now from, like, a healer perspective, I know there are gonna be certain waves in that phase 1 where I'm gonna need to use paralysis on this one mob, make sure I have, like, spinning or, the AoE stun. I can't think of the name of it.
like sweep.
Like sweep up for like a certain pack, right? And I'll know that sort of timing, and I might not know it specifically, but I'll be able to like figure it out, maybe wipe once or twice, and be good, right?
Yeah,
So they'll like you'll know sort of how the encounter goes, and so it's I think in that regard it's definitely going to be easier. But it just depends on how much easier, right? Like I'd
yeah,
like to spend maybe like an hour or two on it, right? Get through it, like learn it, have to relearn a little bit,
yeah.
but
I think it's actually maybe gonna be the weirdest for tanks, because a lot of tanks have completely different kits now than they did in Legion.
oh yeah.
Stuff like the the only one that is maybe appropriate. So in these mage towers originally had like slightly different tuning for different specs depending on, the tanks I think had the most noticeable ones where um For bears, the like puddle under the boss was huge because they had such big range, so they couldn't just like attack him from outside the puddle and avoid the mechanic. Then for prop paladins, the boss had like double the health of any other tank because in theory they did so much damage. In practice, their damage was a little bit not that high. But this expansion, it actually being double might be appropriate because they can drop Ashen and throw hammers and like go nuts.
Oh yeah.
But for example, in Legion when we were doing this, we had two legendaries that we no longer have. One of them healed you when you used Purifying Brew. We don't have that anymore. That was a form of sustain that
Yeah.
we no longer have. Um, we now have Celestial Brew though, but Celestial Brew doesn't line up against rot damage very well. So it's like, well, is this gonna be harder because we can't put on what is it, Guy Plans? We can't put on Guy Plans and like heal for a quarter of everything we purify. It's going to be easier because it's tuned differently and because Celestial Brew is like sleeper pretty good. We have Invoke Neozao now like baseline and we don't have to spend a talent on it.
Yeah.
It's it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope people I think the one thing that I just hope, at least in general, people just don't shit on it, right? I guess is the nice way of saying
Yeah,
it,
I
right? Because like
really want that to.
just because I think no matter what, like you're gonna be if you're going into sort of Mage Tower with the idea that this is gonna be exactly like it was the first time, and like super difficult, very fun in terms of like working out solo what you need to do. Like I think you're gonna be disappointed, but if you treat it more of like, hey, we're about to revisit this old content and get some cool transmog out of it, right? And we'll mess around for a couple days in it. Like, hey, that's I think the way you should sort of view it. So,
Yeah, I mean,
um,
I would be pretty happy if these were tuned pretty high. Um, but
yeah, oh,
also
yeah,
like I also want them. I want domination sets. I mean, domination sets shouldn't work because they don't work outside the mall, right?
yeah.
Part of Azeroth and stuff like that should be turned off. All that kind of thing. That's one thing. So if we can use our neck and Azerite traits, it's going to be completely trivial.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Or I mean, to be oh, think they'll let us use our legendaries? What if you need your legendary to like complete it?
I doubt it.
But maybe not. Yeah, maybe not to use it, but at least to just have it. Yeah, I don't know, because I guess some of those abilities are deactivated now, right? Like they
Yeah,
don't.
most of them
The
are.
legendaries. Yeah, no, legendaries no longer. Yeah. Yeah. So, it'll be interesting to see how they actually implement like the finer details. But I think this will be fun, considering too you'll have 2 weeks to do this at the start, right? Because the first Legion time walking after this patch is 2 weeks long.
Yeah,
So that'll be fun to sort of head back in the Mage Tower. And yeah, I mean, I think most people look at this and say Mage Tower, like the same way you'll hear people talk about like Throne of Thunder and like Hellfire Citadel and sort of that from like a rating perspective being just very good raids, like top tier like rating content. I think Mage Tower is like the best solo content they've ever put in this game, hands
yeah,
down. Like there's
yeah,
nothing like the only thing that comes close for me personally, and it wasn't really solo, was the class mount quests. So doing like the Warlock class mount in
yeah.
Classic was like a very cool experience in terms of like going through that sort of idea. I'm wondering if I like so never had a priest or a hunter, right, to do like their like Anthenum and Benediction quests and what is the hunter weapon? Like rock
Raktalar.
yeah,
Yeah,
like never did those, but I'm wondering like it was a very similar feel of like having some like solo thing to do or like something that just you completed.
yeah.
Um was cool. So yeah. Mage Tower was super fun to do at the time. So I hope it continues. I hope people just enjoy it for what it is and don't like get really upset that like, oh, this it only took me 2 pulls this time instead of like the hundreds I did before. This is way too easy. I was like, well, they didn't
I hope
change
it doesn't
anything.
take people two pulls. I mean, there's like, okay,
Well, yeah,
the
yeah,
worm one is going to take people two pulls because the worm one is easy. Like,
that
oh,
was
we should
the
let's.
yeah.
What's your ranking in terms of the difficulty of these? Which one's going to be hardest? Which one's going to be easy?
So I'll be completely honest with you. I don't think I've done all of them. So the worm one is the one in the cave where you have to interrupt the worm, right? Or you
Yeah,
die essentially. Yeah.
yeah.
That one I did on my it was a one of the hunter specs has to do that one.
Beast Mastery. Yeah,
Um yeah, okay. That was a joke. Yeah. That was seemed very simple. The honestly to be fair, the healer one at the time was probably the hardest. I think the healer one will be generally easier now because healers just have more damage
I
at this
would
point.
disagree with that. I think the tank one was harder than the. Um,
So I did the Brewmaster tank one did take me longer to do than my healer one.
it
I will
took me
tell you because
longer
I
to
got
do than the healer one too. Like I did the Mistweaver one as well. I did all of so I've done all of the challenges, and
mhm,
I did all of the I have all of the artifact skins except for like Warlock and Mage. I think are the only two.
gotcha,
So I
gotcha.
think so. My personal ranking, I would
Yeah.
say, the tank one is going to be the hardest. The healer one is going to be right up there with it. It's going to be second hardest, maybe takes over hardest depending on tuning.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then after that, there's going to be let's see, there's going to be uh, so again depends on tuning. The imp one might be completely impossible because this is the one where I think they could most easily screw up the tuning. The imp one could be third, um, or it could be the closing the eye one, which is the like the frost one. Frost DKs did that. Survival Hunter, Havoc Demon Hunter. So that one was probably like the
Oh
third
yeah.
hardest one in Legion, in my opinion. So it's gonna be one of those two, either the Imp one or the Frost one, and then it's going to be the oh god. Then there's like three fairly easy ones that could all end up like being easier or harder depending on tuning. There's the one, the twins, which is what Marksmanship Hunter balanced. That was theirs. Um, that one took me like 10 pulls when I did it on my Hunter with like crappy gear. Um, and then there's the Worm and the Valor Jar one. And the Valor Jar one was like a joke, as so was the Worm one. Those are both complete jokes. So,
Gotcha.
like,
Y-
yeah,
Yeah, I only really remember the worm one, and that was it. That was just sort of making sure you interrupt the one cast and did enough damage in between, so like you didn't
yeah.
wipe to like the ads that spawned.
And
The
didn't stand on
tank.
the rocks that fell from the ceiling.
Oh, right, yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, the tank one though, I remember getting. I remember like positioning, particularly there was like, wasn't there an ability where it was like two orbs and there was a line between it and you had to dodge? Is it? Am I thinking of the right
You're
encounter?
close. So there's eyes that spawn,
Uh.
and they look at you, and if you don't look back at them, they knock you off.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then there's
And then
also infernals that spawn, and the infernals have a like line frontal that if you get hit by it, you get knocked off. It's
gotcha.
actually such a funny encounter because it doesn't actually care how tanky you are almost at all. It's like
Yeah.
90% just not getting knocked off the platform.
Does the boss do a knockback too? I remember having to like get away from the boss at certain points.
No, so the
Oh,
phase one, the main boss has like a puddle under him that applies a stacking max health reduction.
gotcha. Yeah.
And so you would go in, do damage to him, and then leave the puddle to let the stacks drop and get your health back.
Gotcha. Okay. So maybe
And
that's
then
what
there
I'm
was
thinking.
also like Velen, worst healer in in the
Oh,
World of
that's right.
Warcraft,
Yeah.
would spawn healing orbs that also disoriented people. So you would use that to
Best ability.
interrupt stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. The tank one I remember just being insanely difficult. And like, well, maybe not insanely difficult, but like I remember hearing like the difficulty too would be wildly different depending on what tank you were.
Yeah,
Because
it
like if you
was.
had a higher DPS tank, you just shorten the encounter and a lot of stuff you
And then
wouldn't
you
have
would
to
get
worry about.
fewer infernals, fewer
Yeah.
eyes. The final phase would be easier because you could kill it faster.
Yeah. Yeah, similarly, like that's the same thing. Like with Monk, like because our damage at the time was so low that like we would literally like if you were not a disc priest, sorry, but if like even Holy Pound at the time and like Restoration Druid for sure would like quickly clear everything because they had so much damage and like Monk was like literally killing a mob as the next wave was spawning, at least
Yeah,
in the first phase, where it's just like super tight to do. So
yeah.
um
And all of those numbers are going to be different now.
yeah,
Like right now in Legion, Brewmaster was like pretty good damage, but probably not the highest damage at the time. But
yeah,
it was very durable. But the
yeah,
durability came from Stagger, which basically everything in the counter ignores.
True.
So that meant, but then they also like they tune the HP for the main bosses based on your expected damage, basically for your spec. So like
Uh-huh.
it had more health for Guardian Druid and for Prop Paladin, and less health for Brewmaster and DK. But then it's also like, I mean, if you're going into this, the easiest way. So sorry, the easiest encounter is the Vengeance Demon Hunter one. If you go into the tank one and you're a Vengeance Demon Hunter, that is the easiest encounter out of all of them.
Can
If
get
you're
knocked
not
off.
Vengeance Demon Hunter, then it's the hardest one, in my opinion,
That's
because
so funny.
so much of the fight is just not getting knocked off, and Demon Hunters can literally just glide. Just press spacebar. It basically doesn't have a cooldown.
That's true.
The
That's
only way
true.
you can really die with that by getting knocked off is if you get knocked back, hit glide, and then you get knocked back again after you're already gliding. And then there's a
Yeah,
chance that you can get knocked off before you can deactivate and reactivate glide.
that's true. That's true. Yeah, I guess that would be pretty easy for them. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, oh god, these encounters. It'll be fun to go back to this stuff. It'll be fun to
I'm
like,
super looking forward to it. This is gonna be fun.
yeah. Yeah, particularly, yeah, I'll probably try and do the ones I haven't done because, like I said, I did all the monk ones, did all the hunter ones. There's probably still like a couple out there that I didn't do. And that, to be fair, like the only one I actually distinctly remember a lot is the healer one
Yeah,
because everything else I did. Well, I did the healer and the tank one pretty early, but like the Windwalker one and all the hunter ones I did very late. So
yeah,
like gear wise, I just outgeared it and it was almost trivial, right? I just did it to be fair to get the transmog. So
yeah. Of course.
um
Like
yeah,
I did the
collector.
hunter one. I did the marksmanship hunter one first. Because that was like my my not my main at the time, but like my favorite character at the time, and the one I cared the
Yeah.
most about getting. And then I did Brewmaster one, or I started it. I finished
Yeah.
the Beast Mastery one before I finished the Brewmaster one, because the Beast Mastery one was again the worm, and it took like 5 pulls.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas I spent like 120 on the Brewmaster one or something.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there was definitely, I remember there's definitely a little bit of a competition in Discord at the time about like what week you would get it as like your monk, so your Mistweaver. So I
Yeah,
remember those days were fun.
yeah,
But yeah, that and like, oh my god, I just remember like druids having mass root. So like resto druid, particularly on the mobs that would fixate you, just had the easiest time because they could like root it, cyclone it,
yeah,
so much CC, and like monk, I'd have to like leg sweep, run away, ring them, then after ring was over, port back, but like still doing enough damage to the mobs you need to do damage to, and I was just
yes,
like a
yes.
mess. So it
And then
was a
there's also
mess.
stuff like day one of the Mage Tower. Bears could wear one of their legendaries with Boomkin Affinity and outrange the puddle. They reduce your max HP while still being able to hit the boss
I didn't
and
realize
push the
this.
boss without ever actually having to deal with that mechanic. So they could just sit there outside the range and just like spam and hit them.
That's
And
so funny.
so there's stuff like that that we won't have this time. So there's like people that got the bear one day one because they were able to just ignore the mechanics for the first half of the encounter.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So but yeah, definitely won't see that again. Hopefully, but maybe some
Hopefully,
other funky stuff will come in.
there's no way
But
to
yeah, this
get
is good.
40-yard
Sorry,
swipes again. So
that's true. That's fair. That's fair. But I think yeah, like we talked about this last week a little bit about like bringing content back. I think this is a cool way to do it. And like to be fair, I think the reward structure is like, hey, if you want to do this, it's there. If you don't want to do it, it's not. But like this is sort of one of those things where the community as a whole thought this was super cool. And if it's a part of Legion time walking, which will be sort of a consistent thing now, right? A part of the rotation, then
yeah,
you get to look forward to something like maybe you don't finish everything in the first 2 weeks, but you come back and like whenever it's back up and like 6 8 weeks later and like do like focus on one of the challenges, right? Like get your
yeah,
character ready. So
yeah.
yeah, this will be fun.
I'm really excited. Um, I also, so one last thing before we move off of this topic. Do you
Yeah,
think they should turn off Covenant abilities?
I do actually. I was thinking about that too. I do. I just don't. I don't know if that reduces the power of a class too much or spec too much, right? Like I think you get there is like where sometimes your covenant ability is sort of like you're expected to have it, or it's sort of baked into like what makes your class not maybe not good but play well. I
Yeah.
think losing that, maybe you lose some of like the flavor of being of playing that character, playing that
I'm
spec,
just
right?
thinking like trying to do the tank challenge as a prop paladin. If you're Venthyr, you just drop Ashen and you hit Wings and Seraphim and you just go nuts.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
and then
You
like
don't.
that's the damage gap between a Kyrian prop paladin and a Venthyr prop paladin is pretty high.
Yeah,
Like dropping a 4 minute cooldown on the boss is going to be
it's
so
ridiculous.
much better than pressing Divine Toll. Even though Divine Toll has a much lower cooldown, like you're probably pushing it before your second Divine Toll anyway. So
Yeah. Well, yeah, that and then like two, like even like holy. I think Ashen's just probably an outlier because like I can see holy paladins too just
true.
deleting like waves of mobs off the start, right? And so like the
Yeah,
opening sequence
they
is
just
just a
drop
joke.
Ashen and it's just completely like
Like
Ashen
AFK in
solos
it.
it.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe stun the fixate mobs so they don't get one shot, but like at the end of the day, it's just like yeah,
Yeah.
easy peasy. So yeah.
Whereas like in comparison, I think you could do the only covenant that I think would really not do well for Brewmaster in the tank challenge is Venthyr.
Fair.
Like Night Fae has actually got a pretty nice niche in its consistent AoE because you
Uh-huh.
will
Yeah.
have multiple infernals up and being able to also the Phalanx Stomp can has a long enough range to reach the boss while from outside the puddle unless they change that. So, like it has
Yeah.
upsides, whereas like Kyrian offers a cooldown, and then um, Necrolord offers a different kind of like consistent damage kind of cooldown thing. So I think
Uh-huh.
there's like upsides to each of those three. So I think for most classes it's probably going to be okay. But then there is stuff like Ashen that's just like complete outliers, and
Yeah.
maybe it's correct for them to turn off covenants. And
Or I guess the other question too is like, does it matter, right?
yeah,
Like, does it matter that they're active or not? Because like at the end of the day, there's no power associated here. There's really no. I
yeah,
mean, I think there's a level of like personal prestige, but there's not like
yeah.
hey, I completed all seven and it was super difficult, and like I'm the
I
first
think
one
it
in the world
really
to do it.
depends on
So
what they want for this. If they want it to
yeah,
be super difficult, then I think they have to turn covenants off because it's going to feel bad to be like, yeah, I tried to do it as a Kyrian and I just couldn't do it because it's just tuned for a Venthyr
yeah,
and I'm not a Venthyr and that's bad. But then if they don't want it to be super hard, if they want it to be something where most people are, they put their hour in and they are pretty likely to get it. An hour, maybe two
yeah,
hours, and they get it regardless of covenant or whatever. Then you know it's okay then for it to take 3 pulls on the Venthyr Paladin and 20 pulls on a Kyrian Paladin because of the differences in
yeah.
covenants. Because they're still both going to get it within a couple hours.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so we'll see how they'll see what they think. I mean, I could go. I think I could go either way in terms of having them enabled or disabled. I think it just depends, right? So,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, I think that's it. I know we're super late. I didn't actually do lore corner this week, and I to be fair
Yeah,
did
we
not
both
collect
had busy
questions.
weekends.
Yeah,
So
I
we
was
are,
at brunch, so
I think we're going to wrap it up here. And that's going to be the show for today. So
yeah,
thank you all for listening. Hope you all enjoyed it. We will be back here, same time, same place. The podcast will be online on peakofserenity.com later today, YouTube shortly after, and actually, it might not be. It might be tomorrow this week, but um, it will be up sometime in the next couple of days. Uh, but if you enjoyed this and you want to support it and the other work that we do over on the Peak of Serenity, you can do that by going over to our Patreon at patreon.com/Peak of Serenity. And of course, if you don't want to or aren't able to contribute to the Patreon, please come join the Discord. Discord's a great place. We have a lot of great people there that are very active. I think all of the lounges are super active. All the questions channels are super active, and there's always questions coming in that you can learn from or help answer or anything like that. So that's it. Have a good day, and we will see you next week.
bye.